I will do a quick demo of XP 7.3 and Content Studio 3 and give you a brief insight on what's new. So I've launched everything on my computer, and this screen hasn't changed that much. There's been some cleanup of the XP menu, so it looked better even if you have long strings here. And also you might notice that it now says XP here rather than having this menu symbol. And also installed a few apps to prepare it. The biggest change is actually visible. So if I launch Content Studio, you can see that there's also a few changes here. So we've started working on creating skins, and this is the light skin, and eventually you'll get sort of all of this tied nicely together. And as you can see, it's the XP menu is still here where you used to. However, there's a few new things. So you will notice this area, which has obviously a menu here, and then it says default here. So this is what you get when you upgrade. You'll get this, and you'll see default here. So this is part of what we call projects. And to make projects possible, we've had to do quite a few things. And one of them is introducing this menu. So this is just the beginning. As you can see, we only have 2 entries here now. We have this content entry, and we have settings. So if I click settings, you can see something called projects. And if I expand it, you see default. So default is basically the default project. So when you've been working with XP now, you've only been able to, let's say, put all your sites into one bucket. So we know that several customers have struggled with this, and sometimes you have different people need to work with different content. There's no actually relation between them beyond that you need to get it running. And probably you don't always want to start a new instance of XP for everything you want to start. So we can now create new projects. So I'll go in and click new, choose project. As you can see, there will be more things to create here. And let's call it X files. And we generate an identifier. And this is pretty important. You cannot change this later. It says there as well. Cannot be changed. We can give it a description. Secret stuff. I don't know. Secret stuff. Next, we can choose a default language. And this has been kind of a headache with XP so far, because you always have to set the language on the first root items you create. So now you don't have to. You can set it for the entire project. So we can set US again, maybe, and US, English United States, and then you can choose access mode. And this is another thing that's been a bit cumbersome. You've had to deal with sort of setting up permissions and handling those along the way. Typically people make mistakes, so I can't access it, etc. Now you can choose the access mode immediately when you create the project. So you can say, is this a public project? Everyone can read the content. Is it private? Only project roles can read the content. Or is it custom? Only selected users can read content. So then you can add users and groups, etc. here. So I'll just make it public because it's X files. It's not that secret after all. And then we have roles. So you can now say, I think I have a user here, Katrina keyboard. We can make Katrina, add her, and we can choose a role for her. So you can now choose if she's going to be a contributor, author, editor, or owner. So basically, the further down you get, the more power you have. Basically, the owner can do everything, create sites. He can edit this project even, add the new people here. And has access to the HTML source code and stuff, things like that. Editor, similar to owner, but cannot manage the project. Author can create content, any kind of content. Contributor cannot do anything much, but beyond actually accessing the project and creating issues and stuff like that. And then you have to give permissions if you want to. Let's say if you have some people that should only be working in one area within the project, maybe in some subsection of your site, then you make them contributor, and then you give them detailed access later. So so I can make Katrine editor, and then we can add some other users. Anders edit. We can make him owner, for instance. So the super user and the CMS admin will always have access to all of this. So currently I am super user. I'll just hide this. Oops. So let's save it. See what happens. So if I go back now to the settings page, you can see I now have a new project here. I can also upload an icon if you want to make it more, let's say, easily recognizable. X-Files obviously needs a nice icon. And you can also do this for the default project. If you don't like seeing default, you can simply go ahead and change it. Basic types, whatever. And you can also set the default language for that one. However, you cannot set the roles and that because of backward compatibility. We have dropped that, as that will cause some mayhem with your data needing for republishing, etc. So the default project is going to be there until XP8. So then you'll have to create projects from scratch every time. So save. So going back to edit now, we can see what happens. I now have the basic sites, and I can choose to go to X-Files. So X-Files gives me a clean slate, and I can start creating content here, right? And yeah. And you can recognize pretty much what you see here from earlier. The only change we've done is we actually removed the permissions from the form. And eventually we will also remove settings from the form, so you can focus on the content. To change permissions, you can just click here, and you get access to it directly to modify it. The interesting thing is to see how these roles were actually created. So you can see X-Files author can write, contributor can read, viewer, owner, editor. So you can see that these roles are in the system. Yeah. Another feature we have, let's say I'll just make a few more changes here, is basically the ability to diff. So you can go to version history, and then you can see the changes. So comparing with this version, correct? What? Yeah, always something interesting. Oh, did work nicely yesterday. Well, it's not released yet. We'll have to look into that. But you can see differences between the versions you create. So also there's some other, let's say, minor improvements here and there. For instance, you have the error handling to improve accessibility. When you have errors, the form will be much more clear on that and more visual. You have modal dialogues for mobile, especially. They're improved because you typically have little space when you work with content. So sorry, modal dialogue. I can edit this one. And if you click this one, you can see how the modal dialog now fills the entire space, so it's more efficient using it. And just quickly at the end there, whenever you have created a project, what actually happens is we create a new repo. So looking into this one, you can see here the default repo, sorry, and then you have the X-Files repo. So here's how things are stored. So they're stored entirely separately. And also you can see for, close this one, for roles. Yeah. System here, yeah. You can see that each new project will create 5 roles. So membership in these roles actually give you that access, but you normally don't deal with this and manage them. You just work from the Content Studio interface to manage and create these projects and add people to the roles. So I think that's a very brief summary of what's coming, and we're almost done. So we're just in the final stages of brushing up.
Yeah, Bobby has a question. Any upgrades notes to go to 7.3?
No, you don't need to do anything. You just install new versions and go. So everything will work as it used to.
Yeah, but you will post on developer.
Of course. So we will have release notes on everything you need to do the basics, but there is no changes. I assume that was the question. You don't need to change anything. So you can just start using the new features. There's a few more questions. So Maxim asks if translation layers will be implemented like project. The idea, short version is yes. So you will get a drop down like you saw, but you can also choose within the project. You will have layers, but it will probably not be separate repos, but more like branches. So I hope that answers your question. And then Rune, will project mean that, for instance, cache for an application will have to include a repo name in its cache key? For instance, when using get content, it will work against different repos. Yeah. So basically, you always, this I guess in the end depends on what you've been building. But whenever you get content from the repos, you always include the context, which is the repo name. So if you get from draft or if you get from master, for instance, those are different, already included, and we always had the default repo as part of the URL. So if you just use the content ID, I guess you might get problems if you build a cache that is shared or something between stuff, but that would be like a rare occasion. So short version is use the repo name, the branch name, and the ID to do your caching, to be 100% sure. Yeah, and normally I don't think this will be a problem unless you have some kind of global cache using same IDs for content across stuff.